Hello and welcome to the Twee Couch Guitar YouTube channel. Today we are going to get into this 2021 Kretzmann Tactical 59 DC and this 2015 Gibson Les Paul Junior. Now both of those are a modern take on a very vintage styled guitar, but we're going to see that modern doesn't necessarily mean better, but vintage doesn't necessarily either. These guitars have some features that are modern that you may like and you may not. You get to be the judge. We're going to talk about it on today's therapy session. Let's get started. Now, I've already done a review and demo of the 2021 Kretzmann Tactical 59 DC. I also took that guitar and I put it up against, or kind of did a comparison between it and a 1959 Gibson Les Paul Junior that I borrowed from a friend. The whole idea of that video was to have some sort of here's a vintage example of a Gibson guitar, and here is its modern idea or modern influence, tribute, if you will. Well, I had someone ask me, well, didn't they already do a modern rendition of that? And they did. Matter of fact, they've done a number of different ones, but the one that I think is the most modern is probably the 2015 Gibson Les Paul Junior. Now, I've owned this guitar longer than I've owned the Kretzmann Tactical 59 DC, but this is a little too modern for me. All right, we could go through the good, the bad, and the ugly of both of these, and actually we will go over the tech specs at the very end, and we're going to do an actual demo and play some songs, because after all, isn't it about the tone? Yes, it's absolutely about the tone, and it's about the feel, and we're going to go into that next. But I did want to mention about probably the elephant in the room, which is the ugly that is this guitar. And I know people may be like, look at that top. That is a gorgeous, absolutely beautiful looking piece of mahogany right there, and I agree. And oh, look at that beautiful rosewood, I agree. And then you get to the headstock. And there's a number of things that I despise about this headstock. One of them is the Les Paul logo. I just don't like the Les Paul, the way that it's written, more of that hand signature style, but yet it's really thick, thicker than what you would see a Sharpie done, so I don't necessarily like that. Another thing that I'm not a huge fan of is the 100 symbol. I get it, we're going for a birthday type of an idea, it's cool idea, I don't like it. So that's me personally, that's my take. But one of the other things is something that some of you definitely know, and I haven't shown you yet, and that is the GForce tuners. Now, I understand. I bought this guitar. I decided I got a smoking deal on this with the case, and I decided to buy it. But the reason why I decided to buy it was because these tuners were intriguing to me. The fact that at any moment I could decide that I wanted to be at a drop D, or I wanted to go to E flat, or I wanted to go back to E standard, or I could be backstage and not have the tuner and just click a couple of buttons and then boom, there it is. That's what I really wanted out of this, and honestly, it does a decent job at it. But it also takes a while and is really noisy. But ultimately, these tuners, a lot of people trade them out, and I don't know that you necessarily need to, you just need to know what this is. Probably my biggest complaint is that these ratio on here is usually the ratio is like 14:1, so when you turn, you're getting a certain amount of turns for every rotation you do. These are like 40:1, so it takes a lot of turns to turn it as much as you would have turned it if it was just a regular tuner. And so for that, most people, they end up disliking these and they end up taking them off. Another thing that people don't like is this brass nut, and I actually love it. I think it's pretty cool. I like this 0 fret. I have had 0 issues with this. I've had 0 tuning issues because of this, and I feel like the sustain is a little bit longer, so I actually really like this. Another thing that people don't necessarily like is the fretboard. In true modern form, they decided to make this wider. And honestly, I feel it. It almost seems like a classical neck instead of being that that electric guitar and really being able to put your hand around it. Like, you need big hands to be able to run this. All right, another thing is that the neck is pretty thin, like D-shaped thin. It's like real thin, and I don't necessarily like that. I don't like a flat back to a neck. Other than that, there's really only one other thing that I did not like about this guitar. And the only other thing that it's a modern feature, and I get it, we're talking about something, a modern rendition of a Les Paul, but that thing that I just really did not like is that if I wanted to change out this P90 pickup, I could do so, but it's done through one of those quick connect links. So it's not just solder one lead, solder the next. Instead, it's put to like a computer end, and then it's put into a PC board on the volume and the tone. And it's one of my least favorite things on this. If I wanted to change the volume and tone knobs, do a mod, can't do it. Not unless I want to just take out the whole board. If I wanted to change out the pickups, can't really do it unless I wanted to take out the whole board. And so because of that, this may be a beautiful modern idea, but it's also a disappointment in my opinion. Love this guitar, but there is one thing that I did not mention in the last video that I did on this that I go, ooh, I'm not 100% sure I like this. Hasn't been a problem yet, but not sure. Even though the tuners have started to come into shape and they start to feel good, which was a negative that I had, the other is I think that this faceplate is fun. I think this faceplate is very modern. I think it's really cool, but the truss rod is underneath it. And in order to get to the truss rod on this style with this, they call it body armor on it, you have to take off the strings, you have to take off this plate, and then underneath you can finally get to the truss rod. So that is one modern feature that I go, maybe I need to just drill a hole in here or something. But that's a negative for this one. Otherwise, not nearly as many negatives on this guitar as there was on the modern rendition of the Gibson Les Paul Junior. All right, let's go ahead and start with the Kretzmann Tactical 59 DC. We're going to do something just a little bit on the edge of breakup. See how it sounds. You know, and that sounds really good. Like, I like the way that that sounds. It growls just right. The Marshall, it's growling just right. Lots of good things to it. Let's go ahead and try that. Now, with the other modern rendition, the one that's probably more rightfully so because it is a Gibson, this Les Paul Junior right here. All right, here we go. Oh, that's right. We have to show you the robot tuners. All right, let's go ahead and see how this thing works right here. All right, so go ahead and turn this thing up. What you have to do, well, let's turn. This is also noisier than the Kretzmann. All right, so what you have to do is you have to press a little button right here. Hit this button again, and then you end up hitting this button in the center, and then you hit all the strings. Here, I'll turn it up so you can hear what it sounds like coming through here. And on the back side, it just comes together and says, yep, this is good. And if it's good, then it is not good. So we will go ahead and do that again. All right. No, that's not it either. One more time. Yay! All right, let's go ahead and do this. Okay, so what did I play again? Just kidding. All right, here we go. Still not in tune. All right, one more time. Funny thing, G string's a problem. What do you know? It's a Gibson. All right, so here we go. All right, let's go ahead and crank it up. That's pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and try it with the Les Paul Junior. Alright, well that sounds pretty good too. I did find it harder to play on this guitar because this fretboard is quite a bit wider. So, I think that's only fair that we go ahead and we talk about a few of the specs. Alright, let's go ahead and go a little bit into the specs that we end up having. Now, I know the demo was a little bit short. Honestly, part of it was because I was having some difficulty keeping the Gibson in tune, which is unfortunate. Those robo-tuners were not quite accurate enough. I ended up having to tune it by hand some, which defeats the purpose, but you know what? Usually I don't have that problem. Today, I did. All right, let's go ahead. Let's talk about some of these specs, because if you noticed, like I did, the sound was a little brighter with the Gibson, and it was also a little clearer with the Gibson. And I think the specs will help us understand why. So I'm going to put up the 59 Gibson specs, just leave them up there. Okay, we did that in another video, so there they are. And then I'm going to go ahead and put up the Kretzmann specs. So go ahead and take a look at the Kretzmann specs. And what you notice, of course, is that the Kretzmann's a little more modern in the sense that it's a little wider of a fretboard. It's a little bit thinner of a depth in the neck, okay, all the way through. And then you also notice that the pickup is a little bit hotter. And so because the pickup's a little bit hotter, I truly feel like that ends up hitting the front end of the amp a little harder, and then it ends up being a little darker of a sound. Now the weight was kind of interesting to me in the sense that the 59, the Les Paul Junior from 1959, was right at around 7 pounds, 7.01 pounds, and the Kretzmann was at 7.20 pounds, so not really that much heavier. So let's see how the 2015 Junior stacks up. Well, at the first fret, the width, 1.81. That's a lot wider. Now, you might be going, that's not that much. It's like 1/10 of an inch more. But when you feel it in your hands, you start to notice, yeah, that is definitely pretty wide. How about the depth? The depth, 0.80 inches. Yeah, it's a lot thinner. And that thinness, it kind of flattens out at the back. And I did not like that. I like to feel that neck as well as the fretboard. And I was feeling too much fretboard and not enough of the back of the neck. And so it was uncomfortable for me. You probably noticed, because in the demo, I was a little more clumsy when playing the solo and playing some of the lines on the 2015. And a lot of it has to do with, it just wasn't my mojo. It wasn't my thing. It might be for you, but it's just not for me. At the 12th fret, the width for the Junior, the 2015 Junior, was 2.17, and the depth 0.87. So it stays relatively wide all the way up the fretboard or all the way down the fretboard. And width-wise, or depth-wise, yeah, it also does the same thing. Depth-wise, it's a little bit thin. So how was the output? Well, the output of the 2015 Junior was 8.08. That's actually relatively nice. That's a good low output pickup. And what I noticed from that was that guitar sounded clearer and it sounded brighter, and I liked it quite a bit more as far as the tone was concerned. Unfortunately, it also lost some of its mojo for me because of that big, thick, weird neck. I didn't like. All right. So now, the question that people like is weight. So how much did this 2015 Junior weigh in comparison to the others? Well, that 59 was 7.01, the Kretzmann 7.20, and this Junior 7.9 pounds. So this was a little bit heavier. I'm wondering if you took off the Robo tuners, if all of a sudden that GForce tuner would get rid of some of that weight. I think it's very possible. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is the Gibson 2015 Junior, and it is modern, and it sounds excellent, but it comes with its flaws, in my opinion. The Kretzmann is an excellent modern rendition. I really like it, especially for the price point. But once again, nothing truly replaces vintage. And that 59 Les Paul sounded amazing. Now, the last thing I want to go into before we kind of close things up is price. So how much does a 2021 Kretzmann Tactical 59 DC go for? $300. $300. Plus some shipping, maybe some tax. That's it. Whereas that Gibson Les Paul Junior, even a 2015 model, brand new, they went for over $1,000. They went for about $1,200–1,300 with a case. And on the open market, you're probably looking anywhere between $700 and $900. So for 3 Kretzmanns, you could buy one used Gibson 2015 Junior, and at the end of the day, I'd rather take the Kretzmann. That's my take on this. Alright, well that concludes our time of the Tweed Couch Guitar Therapy session. Thank you so much for joining. Also, if you like what you heard, make sure you hit like or subscribe. We do have a podcast. Make sure you check that out. Also, you can check us out on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks for joining. Until next time.